May 10, 1970, Albert Morby, a dedicated schoolteacher, returned to his family in Gormley Village, Ontario, Canada. However, instead of finding peace, he was confronted with a horrifying scene. His beloved wife, Doreen Morby, aged 34, lay lifeless in their living room, tragically trapping their helpless 21-month-old son beneath her. This devastating event sent shockwaves through the community. Just 13 days later, another town nearby named Palgrave experienced a similar crime. This time, the victim was Helen Ferguson, a 38-year-old woman. The police were determined to find any connection between the two cases, but their efforts led to a dead end. The unsolved murders left the community gripped with fear and plagued by unanswered questions. Years passed, and the case remained unresolved, casting a dark cloud over the area. However, a surprising turn of events finally shed light on the truth. A significant development emerged, revealing the long-forgotten details of these heinous crimes. This breakthrough would ultimately provide the answers everyone had been desperately seeking. Doreen Sidor Morby, born on April 25, 1936, had a mysterious childhood, as details about those years remain unknown. By 1970, she had become a dedicated nurse and had found love with Albert J. Morby, a respected schoolteacher. Together, they created a life as husband and wife, residing in a beautiful two-story house just outside Gormley Village. Their happiness seemed idyllic, but fate had a different plan in store for them. On the morning of May 6, 1970, sometime after 10 o'clock, an unfamiliar vehicle arrived at Doreen's residence. A confident man emerged from the car, walking purposefully up the gravel path. This man had an average height and build, with a neat appearance except for his slightly prominent ears. He was dressed casually, wearing a checkered shirt, a short jacket, and slacks. Those who later saw him described him as someone who could easily blend into any crowd like a chameleon. Doreen, known for her openness, may not have felt alarmed when she heard a knock at her door. However, the exact words the stranger used to convince her to let him inside remain a mystery. It is possible that he simply requested to use the phone, or perhaps he fabricated a more elaborate story. Unfortunately, we may never know for certain. Once inside, it is believed that he coerced Doreen into compliance by showing her a handgun. He may have used Brent, the 21-month-old toddler, as a threat to ensure her obedience. What followed would deeply disturb anyone who cared about Doreen, as well as those who barely knew her. Doreen was forcefully taken to the bedroom, where she endured a merciless physical assault. Just when she thought the nightmare might be over, as she was allowed to pick up Brent and partially dress, she was callously shot in the back. Injured and bleeding, she attempted to crawl away while still holding Brent in her arms. However, the assailant shot her 5 more times in the back of her head. In a futile attempt to shield herself, she instinctively raised her hands, resulting in both of her index fingers being shot through. Fortunately, Brent remained unharmed, but trapped beneath his mother's lifeless body. After locking the front door upon leaving, the assailant took great care to leave minimal evidence of his presence. As the heartless stranger made his way down the gravel driveway, he left behind a scene of unimaginable horror. Doreen's lifeless body cradled her son even in death, creating a haunting image that would forever be etched in the minds of those who witnessed it. Albert Morby, returning home after a long day of classes, was met with a sight that shattered his sense of security. Instead of the warm embrace of home, he found himself frozen in the doorway, confronted by the lifeless form of his wife sprawled on the living room floor. Panic gripped his throat as he rushed to her side, relieved to find their young son unharmed. Without wasting a moment, Albert dialed the police, who arrived at the scene with grim determination. The tranquility of their peaceful town, Gormley, had been abruptly shattered by this act of violence. The investigation of the crime scene uncovered unsettling details. The murder weapon, a rare .22 caliber revolver with an unusually large ammunition chamber capable of holding 9 bullets, had been meticulously wiped clean of any fingerprints. Even the shell casings had vanished without a trace. The only peculiar aspect of this calculated crime was the locked front door. However, what disturbed everyone the most was the sheer randomness of the murder. There were no signs of a struggle, no indication that Doreen had been targeted or threatened. It appeared that she had simply been going about her day when a stranger arrived at her doorstep, ending her life in a senseless act of violence. The police were perplexed by the seemingly motiveless nature of the crime. With a locked house, a missing murder weapon, and a victim chosen seemingly at random, they faced a puzzle with no clear solution. Little did they know that an even darker chapter was about to unfold. 13 agonizing days passed, filled with tension and unanswered questions. Then, on May 19th, 1970, just a few miles east in Palgrave, Ontario, another quiet neighborhood was shaken by a chilling echo of the tragedy that had unfolded in Gormley. In this instance as well, a young family's life was devastated by violence, and once more, a child experienced the terror firsthand. The victim in this case was Helen Ferguson, a 38-year-old nurse. Similar to Albert, Helen's husband, Russell, was also an educator. 9-year-old Dale, the son of Helen and Russell, was at home that day due to a case of mumps. His mother was present to care for him. The day progressed as usual until just after lunch, when the family dog's barking broke the afternoon silence. A car pulling into the driveway, followed by a knock on the door, sparked curiosity in the household. Dale, assuming the visitor was not for him, continued watching television while his mother went to answer the door. Upon her return, she was accompanied by a stranger, a man Dale had never seen before. Helen informed Dale that the man had a sick child in the car and required directions to the hospital. Subsequently, Helen and the stranger vanished upstairs, and Dale resumed watching his program. An hour passed, with only the sounds of the television breaking the silence. Suddenly, 3 loud bangs shattered the peaceful afternoon. Shortly after, the stranger emerged, rushing through the hallway towards the front door. A disturbing detail caught Dale's attention. The man paused briefly, wiping something off the doorknob. Dale waited until he heard the car speeding away before calling out for his mother, his voice echoing in the emptiness. There in the hallway lay Helen, her body surrounded by a pool of blood. Overwhelmed by the sight, Dale hurried to the phone, dialing 911 with trembling hands. Meanwhile, Russell Ferguson, his father, arrived home, oblivious to the nightmare that awaited him inside. He would soon be confronted with a scene of unspeakable horror, the discovery of his wife's murder and the sight of his traumatized son. Police cars quickly descended upon the Ferguson residence, and officers secured the area. The investigation commenced on that very day. Upon conducting a thorough investigation, a disturbing truth was uncovered. The crime scene bore a striking resemblance to the one where Doreen met her tragic end. Both Helen and Doreen had suffered brutal attacks, with the method of shooting being eerily similar, 2 bullets to the head and 1 to the back. It seemed as though the perpetrator was leaving behind a chilling signature. Furthermore, just like in the previous case, there were no spent bullet casings or fingerprints to be found. At that time, identifying someone through DNA evidence was not a viable option. However, the investigators managed to gather other crucial evidence: a sample of the assailant's bodily fluids obtained from the victims. Upon analysis, it was discovered that the killer had a specific blood type, type A secretor. This revelation led to a disturbing realization. The blood type matched that of the perpetrator in Gormley. It was becoming increasingly evident that this was not a random act of violence, but the calculated work of a cunning serial killer. The once peaceful towns of Gormley and Palgrave were now linked by a trail of blood, instilling a sense of dread for another potential attack. Despite the grim circumstances, there was a glimmer of hope in the form of a witness, young Dale Ferguson. He bravely came forward to provide the police with crucial information about the suspect, later dubbed the .22 caliber killer by the media. Dale described the man as having a dark complexion, aged between 35 and 40, of average height, and driving a beige Rambler car, possibly a 1964 or 1965 model. He acknowledged that his observation was brief, so some details might be inaccurate. Equipped with this valuable information and a sketch of the suspect based on Dale's account, the investigators launched an extensive manhunt, the largest ever seen in Ontario at that time. Among the officers involved in the initial investigation was a young constable named Don McNeil, who would go on to become a seasoned detective inspector. Despite the exhaustive investigation, with a constant influx of tips and the thorough examination of over 2,000 suspects by the end of 1970, the authorities reached a dead end. The trail had gone cold, leaving the two murders unresolved and the community gripped by fear. A quarter of a century passed without any answers in the Helen and Doreen cases. The towns of Gormley and Palgrave were left with only chilling memories of the terror that had plagued them. However, in June 1995, a peculiar turn of events unfolded hundreds of miles away in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. A series of robberies took place, but these were not your typical thefts. The perpetrator displayed cunning tactics, specifically targeting vulnerable individuals who were alone, such as the elderly or women. He would approach them under the guise of a potential buyer interested in advertised goods or services. For example, in one instance, an elderly man was selling a hospital bed. The robber feigned interest, claiming he needed to consult his wife before making a decision. The following day he returned, and the man, trusting him, fell victim to the robber's deceit. While the man's attention was diverted, the thief bound and gagged him, proceeding to steal his money and valuables. This became the signature modus operandi of the robber, instilling fear in the hearts of those unfortunate enough to be targeted. These robberies extended beyond homes and even targeted businesses, including jewelry and fur shops. However, the robber eventually made a critical error. He attempted to sell a stolen ring at a pawn shop in Sudbury, Ontario, using his driver's license as identification. This mistake provided the breakthrough the police had been waiting for. Finally, they had a name for the robber: Ronald West, a 48-year-old man. The revelation was shocking, as Ronald was not just an ordinary criminal. He had previously served as a police officer. He had joined the Toronto police force in his early 20s in 1966, but resigned a few years later in 1972, though the exact reason for his departure remained unclear. Records indicated that he had chosen to pursue a different career path. Ronald, a seemingly ordinary man living in Blind River, Ontario, was leading a typical life with his second wife and 2 sons. However, suspicions arose when the police observed him for 2 days from a nearby boathouse, suspecting him of engaging in criminal activities. These suspicions were confirmed on June 30th, 1995, when the police raided his house after spotting him using a cell phone outside. The search uncovered a significant amount of stolen jewelry hidden within his home and vehicles. Furthermore, evidence of tampering was found, indicating that Ronald had attempted to remove the precious stones from many of the stolen rings. Realizing the success of their investigation, the police wasted no time in arresting Ronald. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Ronald pleaded guilty to the robberies in August of that year. The judge, upon delivering the sentence, strongly condemned Ronald's actions, describing them as shocking and meticulously planned, causing immense terror to his victims. Consequently, Ronald was sentenced to 10 years in prison. As the year 1995 came to an end, Inspector Ed Pellerin found himself in southern Ontario for a routine annual case review. Fate intervened when he struck up a conversation with Inspector Don McNeil about the Ronald West case. Pellerin mentioned that after Ronald's imprisonment, his house in Blind River had been sold. During the renovation process, the new owners made a startling discovery hidden behind the bathroom ceiling tiles, a plastic bag containing a permit for a specific 9-shot .22 caliber revolver. The permit, issued on December 29, 1969, was registered under Ronald's name. Intriguingly, the purchase of the weapon itself could be traced back to 1972, shortly after Ronald had resigned from the police force. This revelation shocked McNeil, as the permit matched the description of the very same gun used in the unsolved murders of Doreen and Helen in 1970. Motivated to delve deeper, McNeil conducted further investigations and uncovered that Ronald had been off-duty during both killings. Furthermore, it was revealed that Ronald had frequented the same area as Doreen Morby, one of the victims. McNeil then contacted officers who had worked with Ronald in the 53rd Division of the Metropolitan Toronto Police. Their memories portrayed Ronald as a quiet and unassuming officer who carried out his duties competently, but did not go beyond what was required. Despite the slow progress of justice, the murders of Doreen and Helen, previously considered cold cases, were given a new lease on life. McNeil, persistent as ever, resumed the investigation. A potential breakthrough appeared to be the preserved samples taken from the victims in 1970. Fortunately, advancements in technology allowed for a significant development when a letter Ronald wrote from jail was subjected to forensic analysis, revealing a saliva sample. This enabled investigators to gather enough evidence to obtain a court order for a blood test from Ronald himself. The results were conclusive. A match was found. Nearly 3 decades after the heinous crimes, this definitive proof led to Ronald's arrest for the unsolved murders. Ironically, during the initial inquiry in 1970, over 3,000 suspects were questioned. It is almost inconceivable that Ronald, who would have likely been involved in the original manhunt for the killer, managed to evade detection. His name did not even appear on the list of suspects. Justice, though delayed, was eventually served. On August 26, 1999, at the age of 52, Ronald was charged with first-degree murder for the 1970 attacks and homicides. He later pleaded guilty on August 7, 2001, and was sentenced to 2 life terms. Presently, he is incarcerated in an undisclosed medium-security facility. In the early hours of August 13, 2005, Rodriguez unlawfully entered a residence, armed himself with a knife from the kitchen, and proceeded to a bedroom where a 21-year-old woman was asleep. He threatened her with the knife in an attempt to commit a sexual assault. Rodriguez momentarily shifted the knife during the assault, allowing the woman to disarm him. According to Mills County Sheriff Anthony Poole, the incident deeply affected the entire county. Sheriff Poole emphasized that such occurrences were rare in the county. Following a brief struggle, the suspect escaped, leaving behind a single drop of blood. This drop of blood was a crucial piece of evidence that was collected by the Mills County Sheriff's Office, but due to limited technology, little progress could be made. The blood sample was eventually uploaded to the combined DNA index system. The case remained unsolved for nearly 20 years, causing frustration among all involved parties. Sheriff Poole recalled the shock and disappointment felt by the county residents. In 2021, the Texas Rangers collaborated with the Sheriff Office to conduct a familial DNA search on the blood sample, utilizing new technology funded by the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative. A familial match was identified, leading to the arrest of 41-year-old Jesse Rodriguez. Rodriguez promptly confessed to the crime, expressing relief at being apprehended after nearly 2 decades of guilt. He admitted to breaking into the victim's home and attempting to assault her, but ultimately fleeing after sustaining an injury during the struggle. Jesse Rodriguez from Zephyr admitted guilt to attempted aggravated sexual assault of an adult, resulting in a 20-year prison sentence. Sheriff Poole hailed the outcome as a significant victory for the county. The Texas Rangers acknowledged the crucial role played by Maricopa County Sheriff's Office in collecting DNA, as well as the assistance provided by forensic scientists from the Department of Public Safety Crime Lab in Waco, Garland, and Austin. Sheriff Poole expressed pride in serving the public and communities. The breakthrough in a major cold case was revealed by the Texas Rangers just before Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. Charlie Wilkinson, Executive Director of Combined Law Enforcement Associations of Texas, emphasized the importance of showing gratitude towards law enforcement for their continuous efforts in ensuring public safety, stating that while every day should be Law Enforcement Appreciation Day, it is essential to acknowledge and thank them for their dedication. On January 24, 1985, the lifeless body of a woman was discovered by a truck driver on Highway 78 in Olive Branch, Mississippi, near the Coldwater Bridge. The investigation conducted by the DeSoto County Sheriff's Office revealed that she had been strangled with a ligature. Notably, the woman was missing her shoes, undergarments, and jacket. Despite their efforts, the authorities were unable to identify her, classifying her as a Jane Doe. The DeSoto County Sheriff's Office described her as a female, weighing around 110 pounds, standing at a height of 5'3", and estimated her age to be between 20 and 35 years old. They also noted her distinctive features, including red to blonde hair, 3 small piercings in each ear, tattoos on the inside of both ankles, and a surgical scar on her left forearm. Unfortunately, no further details could be determined about her identity, and the case remained unsolved for nearly 4 decades. However, in 2022, a breakthrough occurred when Carla Davis, a philanthropist and Mississippi native, provided funding to the DeSoto County Sheriff's Office and the Mississippi Office of the State Medical Examiner. Their goal was to address the backlog of cold cases in Mississippi, including the unidentified woman's case. They decided to send forensic evidence to Othram, a forensic laboratory, in hopes of finding a match for the remains. Additionally, the sheriff's office thoroughly investigated leads from individuals who believed the Jane Doe could be their missing relative. These leads were meticulously examined and ruled out by the crime scene technician and evidence clerk of DeSoto County. Finally, in March 2024, Othram successfully matched the DNA of the unidentified woman's body. After nearly 40 years, her brother residing in California was contacted and informed of the discovery. The woman was finally identified as Lori Ann Mealer Pennell, who was born on September 6, 1962 in Missouri. Tragically, she was only 23 years old when she met her untimely demise. Prior to her disappearance, Lori Ann had been seen at a truck stop in West Memphis, Arkansas. Her family had filed a missing persons report, but she was never located. In remembrance of Lori Ann, her remains were laid to rest at Blocker Cemetery in Olive Branch, with her gravestone bearing the name Jane Doe and the date her body was found, January 24, 1985. The DeSoto County Sheriff's Department has affirmed its commitment to tirelessly pursue the individuals responsible for the crime. In a press release, they stated, "We firmly believe that justice knows no bounds of time, and as such, we will persistently strive to identify the culprits and ensure they face the consequences of their deeds."